Types of Slavery by Allison Bork, Elizabeth Berry, and Aaron Hamlin.
Slavery officially became illegal in 1948, yet it still occurs around the world in many different forms. There are currently over 27 million people enslaved across our planet, which is more than the total number of slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. This estimate does not compare to the many torturous and scary forms of modern-day slavery that occur around our world every day.
Almost all forms of slavery around the world, including trafficking and bonded labor, have some aspect of forced labor associated with them. Forced labor is any work or services that people are forced to do against their will, threatened by some form of punishment and violence. Forced labor begins when people are illegally recruited by individuals, governments, and businesses to work for them. The victims of this can be anyone, men, women, and children, who are kept at their work by illegal means with little or no pay. Forced labor can take place in industries such as agriculture, fishing, domestic work, construction, mining, and prostitution. Typically, people who face forced labor encounter brutal conditions with harsh leaders.
Domestic slavery is forced labor in household tasks. However, this can be a harsh form of slavery because it is a form of private slavery. This means that bad conditions, long hours, low pay, low food supply, and brutal abuse occurs often and goes without consequence. Most of the slaves involved in domestic slavery are women and girls, and widespread sexual abuse is a very common form of abuse in these households. In domestic slavery, there is also usually a small, inadequate, off-duty living quarter for these workers, and because of the bad conditions, there are often cases of untreated illnesses.
There are an estimated 8.4 million children around the world that are in slavery. Some examples of child slavery are children used by others for their own profit, forced child labor on farms and in factories, and children who are forced to be in the military. A child's safety and development is most harmful when they are forced to work in particular factories where there is dangerous machinery or exposed to toxic substances. This can be very hazardous work and is the worst form of child labor and child trafficking. Children are being increasingly brought over national borders, sometimes illegally, and away from their families and the place they once called home.
Approximately 2.2 million people are enslaved in a form called state-imposed. These people can be enslaved by their own governments, penal systems, or by rebel groups. Someone who is enslaved by these organizations might experience labor such as forced prison labor or be forced to work at public works. Like any other slave, they have no way out of such conditions.
Bonded labor is when labor is demanded in repayment for a loan, and it exists in places of poverty where people are forced to take loans in exchange for their labor to survive. However, it becomes slavery when people are tricked or trapped into working for much more time than is needed to repay the debt. These violators are able to trick the workers into staying with them with threats of poverty or violence, or by keeping them under surveillance or lock and key. Bonded labor also contributes to the problem of human trafficking because the slaves have to pay human traffickers to bring them to their jobs, and once there, they can't leave until their debt is paid and are forced into slavery.
Children are trafficked for many different reasons, but the scariest one of all is for sexual reasons or prostitution. Young girls are constantly being trafficked illegally to foreign countries against their will. Children are also forced into marriage at a young age, another example of child servitude and trafficking. Prostitution and young marriage can lead a child to face serious psychological changes, catching diseases, personal sufferings, and scary encounters that a young child should never have to face in their lifetime. Anyone involved in recruiting, transporting, harboring, receiving, or obtaining a person to be used as a sex slave is guilty of a very serious crime.
All of these types of slavery are horrible and occur constantly all over the world, but you have the power to make a difference in the lives of these slaves. There is a possibility that in 25 years there can be no slavery, but that takes many people wanting to make a difference in the world. There are so many forms of slavery, and you have the power to stop them from torturing innocent people.